Welcome, everybody, to Mentor Time. This is a topic that I'm very interested in finally being able to present in Mentor Time. I've done it a couple times already for different private groups and actually did it for early on after the chaos of January firings federal workers. We're going to do a lot of what we usually do in Mentor Time, lean back and learn. You'll be learning and engaging at the same time. But I hope that you'll provide your comments because each time we get feedback, I find more and more ways I can make it more useful. We'll get started with this. And as I've been doing more so lately, I want to give you the takeaway to reflect on. Telling your story with more impact comes from using transferable skills categories. I suddenly realized and said to Ron in January, everybody talks about transferable skills as if you just know how to do it. There was very little on the web saying this is how you describe it. It was just long lists of things. So I want you to either put in the chat or use Slido. How comfortable do you feel using transferable skills? Now, I'm not going to define the question. I know it has multiple ways you could interpret using transferable skills. I want you to decide what you want to answer from not at all to easy as ABC and see if we get a lot of regression to the mean. We've got a 2, meaning a little bit. In the chat, we have 2 3s. I expected people might group around. I would say until I started working in this and thinking about it and understanding what advice has been being given for the last 5 years to job seekers, I would say that I thought it was easy as ABC until I discovered it's not as easy as ABC. Thank you all for all that input. Here's what I've been hearing as I've presented about it, but also reflecting on what people talk about in job seeker help meetings. Someone says, I'm a trainer. I don't have other job tasks, meaning they do stand-up training all day long. And I'm sure in your brains you're saying, maybe you do. I also hear people who say they were hired for one thing, but they're doing something else. I got this question a few months ago, someone sent me a job posting and said, Sue, she was actually an expert in program management, but she's saying now in everything else, I'm supposed to be excellent in data, all things data, data viz, data analysis, whatever. And a lot of people are now saying, I don't think I ever really understood what it meant to say that I know how to use them. So take a quick minute in the chat, give me a phrase or longer if you want. How do you define transferable skills? What is that to you? How do you think about transferable skills when you think about applying for jobs, talking about a promotion, maybe to a different business unit? I see Ron gave a 5 for his comfort with transferable skills. That's great. I'm really happy someone has a 5. Peter says skills that are used in different settings. Great. That's really true. And sometimes it's skills that are used in the same setting that could be different. I'll throw my definition in there. Ron says skills that begin in one domain and then can port to what seems like a different domain. Yes, exactly. Where things are applicable across domains. So as others contribute, I'm going to show you how we're going to get here today. We're going to start with, oh my gosh, my career is changing and fast. I would argue in the last 10 years, it has been all along. We've been more aware of it right now because more people are making pivots, looking at doing side hustles or taking side hustles into business. We're talking about a lot of nonlinear, twisty, turny career paths. And then we're going to go through an exercise of how you can think about describing your transferable skills to make them more effective as you're still telling your story. And as always, we end with, what should you do? So let's get started with my career is changing fast. And we'll talk about what transferable skills are. This was the only actual long list that I could find. You'll see it rolling up slowly. Everybody's got the top 15 transferable skills you must have, or by domain transferable skills. They're all across the map, from conflict resolution to leadership to able to do a budget in Excel, from big, high level to small detail. And a lot of what transferable skills has been confused or conflated with in the past has been those skills where we're talking about soft skills, or what I call people skills, the ability to communicate, the ability to work across cultural areas, working in teams, etc. But I want to remind people where skills fit into what we call the learning to experience continuum. Now, this is a three-level experience continuum that you'll find other versions of. But when we first learn something, that activity introduces new information, or updated, but oftentimes new. And the skill becomes the knowledge that we've learned along with guided practice that you gain. And it's important to remember that learning isn't just sitting and reading something or taking an online course. You're also doing guided practice. But the experience comes from a skill being applied in real world settings with the results validated by the end user. So people who tell me, or I should say on LinkedIn, every day I see several people who are taking AI courses or data viz courses. And they said, I just completed my course. And everybody says, great. And in my mind, and I said this to someone last week, I posted on her comment, this is really great. I'm sure you learned some interesting things. Tell me how you're going to take it forward. So if she doesn't have experience yet, at least she can say, yes, now I'm going to do X and Y. People doing data and IT, you can volunteer for pro bono projects, all of that. But I want to make sure people understand, and some of you have been with me for a long time, I don't equate skills as experience. So we'll keep that in mind as we're talking about transferable skills and why this also helps you get to being able to describe them in an experience-based way. Just tell me 0 if you've never heard of this continuum before, or 1 if it sounded like something you've learned or worked with or whatever. I expect most of you have heard some version of this. Peter says 1. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Similar, right, Ron? Thank you. Yeah. There are many out there, but they don't. I tried to make this as easy as possible for those that aren't learning and development managers who live in that world. All right, so how are we going to do these things? First of all, just a reminder, almost everything we do is making sure we're talking to the other side of the conversation. So you're doing this to be able to effectively convey to someone else why you are the appropriate candidate, why you should get the promotion to VP, whatever you're applying this discussion to. And what I came up with when I started thinking about why a list of skills doesn't work for me, doesn't help, and it doesn't work for me because it's hard for me to teach and mentor people to use a list of skills. But when I thought about categories of skills, it made more sense because it helps you take your skills and your experience to the higher level of contributing to a complex system. And our work is always a complex system, no matter what kind of work we do. So I'm going to show you 10. These aren't the only ones, but these were some that occurred to me that many people have. It was influenced by people that were being separated from federal government and contractor jobs in the last couple months. So I started thinking most of the people that contact me do X and Y. So we'll go through each of them just to show you what they are. Not surprisingly, leadership and management, client and partner collaboration, project management and implementation, admin and finance, training and facilitation. Again, choose the words you want for these big buckets. Communicating results to audiences. I would say that's something much, much newer in the last 20 years. and I think it needs to be called out. Executive strategies, briefings, and industry advocacy, which I think is also an area we don't define and talk about well. Business coordination. And now we're getting to artificial intelligence for business needs, and then digital literacy. Those two especially are really important. So I want to show you an example, and some of you may know Alex Shannon. She took the course with Ron and me about a year and a half ago and gave me permission to use her stuff when she left the course. And then when I did this, she said, "Oh, this is great." So I didn't have her most updated CV, and she's been in this job for a while as the deputy coordinator of Agenda for Change. And she's done a good job on her LinkedIn describing what she's been doing and helping identify her results and evidence-based achievements. And at the bottom, you can see that she has skills that she's used in LinkedIn, which is great, to show that. So I took her information in this and in other parts of her work. She had other jobs that she posted there. And I took the 10 categories that I just showed you and made categorizations of what I saw in her jobs. These were just my phrasing of it. And then what I did is tried to map out. So on the left is Alex from her descriptions of the work that she's doing. And on the right are the 10 categories. Does everything fit in neatly? No, not necessarily. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I've highlighted in red, and you'll see it move across different areas. For example, she has a lot of leadership and management, but look at the way it comes through. Program leadership, cross-functional team leadership, which I argue is different from managing distributed teams, for example, and then executive support, again, an area that she calls out in the way that in the work that she's been doing. When we move on to project management and implementation, you saw in her LinkedIn, the first skill she had is implementation plans. Multiple project coordination. We don't always give ourselves credit for that. And then here's where team management comes in, different from what we were just talking about, the cross-functional team leadership. Getting to executive strategies, she's done design strategies and strategy implementation. And that allows you also for people that are working at executive coaching levels or briefings, people who work a lot on industry advocacy. And I don't mean lobbying advocacy for trying to make changes, for example, policies and laws. Moving on to client-partner collaboration, she talks about partnership building and partnership development. Again, I thought those were very important to think about. And then admin finance, you'd expect that, operations management, financial management. So this was just a quick example to see how the way that I summarized the things I saw in the 2 to 3 jobs she had on LinkedIn most recently, how they fell out in the areas she's working in. And then I, of course, decided, how are we going to use this? If Sue, she loves a spreadsheet. So I decided to put together a spreadsheet. And I'm calling the ones that we see all the time listed as traditional transferable skills on the left-hand column. And across the top are the 10. But wait, there's plenty of space for more. I'll show you in a minute. So I took what I saw that from Alex's work and the areas that she's done and plotted them against some of these are big buckets, but some are just a statement: empathy, initiative, decision-making. Those are the soft skills, I think, the people skills that are hard for us to describe. But now when we see where they fall out, she can weave them into discussions. And so I took some wording I made up some wording from what she's been doing and said, I've had 2 leadership and management roles, blah, blah, blah. I'm leaving all this for you to read, but weaving in adaptability, empathy, and communication. So you can see how this helps you potentially put together better explanations of where you fit into a job if you're writing a cover letter, for example. And then below that, I put in the new 10 areas just because I put in her areas, sorry, the areas that she had, the big buckets she had, and started plotting them. Again, it mostly works the way it's already written, but then added in things like that are hidden from the traditional list that we saw, the work that she's been doing in executive support and mentoring cross-functional teams in her portfolio. And this can go on and on. Admin finance, two little ticks there, but she's actually had it in 3 roles beyond her 5 years as deputy director in Agenda for Change. In this case, she had the words that she could put in that will help relate to a job posting. Now, this Excel spreadsheet goes on, and you'll get the links to this when I send out the recording. I'll send you the link to the diagram of the 10 icons, but also you'll get this Excel spreadsheet with the column filled in for the traditional skills, and then below that, I put in Alex skills if you wanted to try to do this for yourself. All right, what should you do? I chose this picture deliberately because you have to try it on and see if it works for you. Not everybody that has done it in where I've done workshops and put people through some time with exercises has felt it was useful for them. A few people have done it already and said it was very useful for them to be able to summarize their career or the last 10 years. So, given what we've already talked about, how do you think you'll use this or not? You can tell me this doesn't feel like something that's going to help me any more than what I'm doing already, which is fine. It's just another way to think about it. But I'm just curious what you're thinking now after your listen and learn session. Or if someone wants to unmute and say it, you're welcome to do that too. Ron says he likes the tabular presentation as a tool. Yeah, I think that's very helpful when we have something to plot out, and Stephanie agrees, plot out because you can begin to see your overlap between how you phrase it or how, and for example, if you've got a resume that you're tailoring to a particular job, how you can map that to things that you know you have strengths in. Anyone else?
I'm just going to jump in. For me, I have a few analytical tools that I've used, and I think I've shared them with you on occasion. And they're really it's in my domain, which is training, design, and support, and task analysis, and so on. I think a tool like you presented would be a very interesting adjunct to some of the stuff that I've done. So that if I were assessing, doing my typical analysis of a position, then applying this table to it as well would help draw out those things which might fall off the planet if you didn't recognize them as these soft skills that ought to be expressed.
Great, thank you, Ron. That's very helpful. Any other comments? All right. Well, as I said, this is a chance for you to figure out, does this work for me or not? I'm making choices in choosing sweaters and shirts. You can make a choice about which categories. And as I said, most people who've done this with me have said, Sue, where is my technical work? Or I'm doing knowledge management that isn't really represented here, except maybe in partner collaboration, which is true. It wasn't meant to represent everything. It was big buckets of things that people, I think, are familiar with. Ron, you have a comment.
Yeah, it's interesting because this brings up old discussions from decades ago. And it's about this business, various learning theories and tasks and all that stuff. And the idea of skills. And there is an attitude among some that when you say the word skill, you mean something physical. And so the issue is really about the cognitive component of the behavior. And so writing, there's a high cognitive, whether you use a pen or a typewriter becomes less important, but the big deal, the big activity. It happens between the ears. And that's the sort of thing. And the best way to illustrate it is, how many here know how to, just think in your own mind, whether you're going to say yes or no, how many in here know how to push a button? How many in here know how to pull a lever? How many in here know how to read a dial? How many in here know how to turn a wheel? Well, you have all the physical skills necessary to fly an airplane. And the cognitive component is the easy piece. Now, transferable skills, when you look at flying an airplane, I can fly a car, and I've flown a simulator, I've done this, and I've done certain things, and some of that might transfer over to flying an airplane. So you might have an easier job of it, say if you've driven race cars or something, I don't know. And now you can fly high performance jet, I don't know. But the idea there is that the relationship between one set of behaviors to a new set of behaviors, there, even if it is not directly transferable, it may turn out to be something which will boost your ability to get into the job more quickly, because you have something that is sufficiently similar from a cognitive point of view, so that you can get on and jump into this new position or whatever, even though it might even look different. Like flying a high performance jet and driving a race car, or even just driving my little Miata down the street, there are certain similarities that are transferable, but I'm not going to get behind in the cockpit. I promise I won't.
No, but one thing that the healthcare industry took from airplane flying was the use of a preparatory checklist, for example. So when you think about transferable skills, process improvement and things, yeah, it's true. I think there's a lot of adjacencies that I always get annoyed. I was reading the same language again today. Make sure you connect the dots for the reader. And I'm thinking, how many of these people are smart like me, have master's degrees? Maybe they don't know public health, but I've learned, I remember when HIV came in, I've learned how HIV can be like family planning or can be like bed net distribution. It's more the expectation as well, Ron, that we are now not just selling ourselves constantly in the story we tell and conveying our words, but we are having to train our audience, who isn't necessarily wanting to be trained, to hear our side of the convo. And what we're doing is falling into, I think, a more US model. I think in the world we've had in global development and public health, people can read CVs of people who've worked in the US in public health and say, oh, yeah, she'd do fine in Jamaica or whatever. So maybe I'm overreading it, but I think the whole beauty of this, of what you just said, is or how I was hearing it is, we need to give ourselves the time to think about that, not just, oh, I know how to communicate to different audiences, but rather what's these categories help us move to, what are the outcomes we're trying to influence. We're trying to influence project management. We're trying to influence better partner collaboration or whatever. All right, so on to, again, 10 categories, one Excel spreadsheet. It'll look like this. You'll see up on the right, add more here, use it however you want or don't. I'll send the links out when I get this caption tomorrow for you if you want to try it. And I would remind you of telling your story with more impact from using transferable skills categories. I think I know you'll get the visibility you want. I'd love to have anybody unmute before I ask Ron for comments, because I still want to hear, this is something that's very different from anything you've probably heard, because no one's really talking about it this way. I'm just curious thoughts you have, if you want to unmute and let us know. How does this sound to you, or it doesn't feel like something that is going to be helpful for you in career, which is fine. I don't have one size doesn't fit all in this case.
Well, I think it just helps to know how to map. So you're saying take the job announcement and put those skills across, and then crosswalk it with what we do know the skills that we have, to see where the match is.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's to give you a framework Even though it's two-dimensional, it helps you have a three-dimensional way to categorize yourself and the job and look for the overlapping areas. Ron, comments?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's just, and see, for me, the wheels are going, and I'm thinking, oh, Sue, if you and I had met some time ago, a couple of decades ago, I could have improved my ability to do certain types of conversations with people. Because, see, I'm pulling content from them, trying to fill in a form. I think I've shared the form with you. And so I could see myself using a table like this to help extract even more information, especially on this quote unquote soft skill, transferable skill, whatever you want to call it, domain, which is good because, from my mind, when errors and problems are created, it's invariably nothing to do with physical skill. It's invariably issues of decision making and not properly categorizing content or whatever. There's the various types of brain activities that we do, and invariably it's because they've miscategorized or whatever. And so those are the kinds of things that, when I was doing a lot of analysis, we were looking for is where's the likelihood of error to occur and all the rest of it. And that's how I would be working with it. Because in our world, what we're talking about here, expressing yourself, okay, I've encountered that stuff. I've had to solve problems. I've had to avoid errors. I've dealt with errors, and I did stuff. And the whole idea behind that is this is entirely in this domain. This is the stuff. This is in the transferable skill domain. Whenever you encounter challenges and resolve them, it's gray matter, and it's very important to try to capture that stuff. And then when you add in other things like there's relationship management issues, oh, we had a problem, and then there is this component because people were sensitive and they owned it, and here I'm coming along making a mess of their lives because they have this thing that they did, and now I've got to resolve the problem, and on it goes. And it's that kind of thinking about how I, as a person, helped the employer solve a problem that included people who had ownership issues and all the rest. You can see the complexity, and if you can capture that complexity, that's what we're talking about here. That's what shows that you are a high performer. And it would be the kind of thing that when you express it in the right kind of documents, yeah, sign her up, sign them up.
So what I'm going to close with before I ask Ron to summarize and close the meeting is, I deliberately didn't put and then use AI in this way, but I want to tell you the way that I see it useful. Depending on your age group, if you're of the age that I am, you were raised to do things with pen and paper because that's all that existed besides the typewriter. So there's a lot to be said, though, for mapping things out on paper. And in fact, most of the data visualization people that I follow and learn from always talk about sketching something out on paper before they even go to a chart. They do storyboarding, whatever. But the AI part of it isn't give me the categories of what Alec did in her job, but rather for you to try to figure out where your big buckets are. And then let AI do the grunt work. Okay, which jobs did they come from? And then you do the mapping. And again, having it help you summarize things. I gave you an example a couple weeks ago, not so much on results itself, but rewriting a result. I was surprised at actually how good one of the LLMs was in writing it, pretty close to what I would have written by myself. So I still think as people are guiding us more and more now on where AI is useful, we still need to take control, and taking control means we're the ones that have the roadmap in mind. I want to get here, I want to get there. It can give us a lot of extra work. If you dumped it all in first into AI and said, take these 10 categories, take these 20 skills of mine, however you want to either take your skills or take the actual words, you're going to end up with a lot you have to sift through. So I think you need to do some of the categorization first yourself, because it also helps you target where do I want to go in the future. I've had people who've said, I've been a technical writer, someone who I talked to last week. I've been a technical writer for 20 years, but that's not what I want to lean into more. I want to do more of the knowledge management I only did for the last 5 years. Like data quality, we know that the data only will give us what's actually reported there. And if someone's done something for 20 years, they're going to have many more experiences than than the person who's only had 5 years in knowledge management. So that is to say, AI has a role, but I didn't bring it up today. I wanted to talk about the idea of giving you the literal brain exercise of trying to map it and get your own three-dimensional spaces. So any last comments? I'm sure some of you were thinking, this would have been easy, Sue, you could have just done it with AI, but it wasn't so easy. When I did early on in January was exercising this for presentations a lot in terms of transferable skills. So love to hear. Oh, Peter, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been trying to think and process as you've been going through it. I think it's an interesting way to map your skills out. And I want to try and play with it first and see if it can help me, especially in a transition time and thinking about where else I might move to. So I think it could be good for that. I don't know if I see AI as helpful in this, since you were ending on that. I think it would put things in a lot of ways that maybe it would change how you think about one or two things, but I would think this is much more a pen and paper kind of mapping it out yourself. And I think AI is automation rather than, as Ron is thinking, the gray matter, thinking about things out. So that's my thought about AI. I wouldn't have even thought about putting it in, but
Oh,
an
thank you.
interesting way to think through things. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, AI is just another tool we have, like an Excel spreadsheet, a little more powerful. I wanted to mention it because there will be people who, if I didn't mention it, would have thought, Sue, now we've got AI to help us. I'm going to let Ron summarize and close the meeting, please, if you will, Ron.
Sure. Yeah, just to comment on the AI thing. I've been messing around with some AI stuff. And what I would imagine, if you were going to apply it, would have to be an iterative process. So you begin with a first cut of whatever it is you're doing, and depending on your prompts and so on. And then what I have found is the iterations as you move down, you'll refine whatever it is you're working on. So that's my only comment on that. And so I can certainly see how this would work, but it would not be, here it is, go give me the thing. I would see an iterative process where you would come up with stuff doing that. And that would be how I'd recommend it. Anyway, thank you, everyone. This is great. I see we lost, was it Sheila, I guess, was here. We lost her along the way. It's very dark there and very late. And so thank you, everyone, for coming. Look forward to the next time we get together. And Sue, you hit it out of the park. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.